Hello, everyone. I want to do a quick review of the week 5 study questions having to do with the singularity. These are open-ended questions. They really aren't wrong answers. If you're reasonably informed about the materials for this week, I think that your answers could go in all sorts of different directions, but I thought that I would at least give you a sense of what I was thinking when I asked the questions. Number one, what is the singularity? Well, that depends. In my own mind, there are two basic notions of it. One is the larger notion, and the other is more focused, or the narrower notion. But the larger notion is what you'll find in the earlier sources that I gave you, especially that remark by Stanislaw Ulam attributed to John von Neumann. The idea that technology and its effects on human life would, at a certain point, reach a certain level where human life as we know it could no longer proceed, that human life would have to proceed in a different way. It wouldn't be that we would go extinct, but that we would go so far beyond the traditional conditions of human life that we would be in some sort of, I suppose the implication is some sort of post-human period. And that's the general idea, I think. The general idea that technology in general, which is close to the Jonas thesis, is moving to such a point that things will be different. Things have to be different. Things will be different. The more narrow conception is the one that focuses on the emergence of an artificial intelligence, especially the idea that such an artificial intelligence, a true AI, would very quickly transform itself into a superintelligence. So that not only would we have to deal with the existence of a non-biological person in the form of a computer artificial intelligence, but that because that artificial intelligence would very quickly become a so-called superintelligence, or what is called this week an AI plus or AI plus plus by Chalmers, that it would very quickly kind of do the sort of thing that von Neumann was thinking was happening gradually in maybe a more radical way, because it would solve so many scientific and technical problems and develop certain technologies at a very, very quick pace, that it would transform the conditions of human life, that we would be faced with not only a true artificial intelligence, how do we deal with that, but that artificial intelligence would very quickly revolutionize the way we live. So I think that there are a couple different answers, at least, to the question, what is the singularity? Number two, why does the prospect of the singularity pose ethical challenges? I think that, again, that's a very open-ended question. There's any number of ways of answering it. It really depends on what you focus on and what you emphasize. But there, too, I think that, on the one hand, the emergence of an artificial intelligence would pose a tremendous, novel, new ethical challenge, just the kind of thing I think that Jonas had in mind, insofar as we would have an artificial person that we would have to figure out how to deal with. Does it have moral status? Should it have political status? Things like that. But of course, also the tremendous ethical challenges that would result from the supposed technological breakthroughs that the superintelligence would give us. Just to think of a couple, the ethical challenge of the extension of the human lifespan, perhaps indefinitely. That would pose a whole host of ethical challenges. That is, if we basically were able to defer death indefinitely, especially, but even if it was just for a period of, say, hundreds of years, that would force us to make all sorts of decisions about what to do. The kind of ethical challenges that would come up from other technological breakthroughs, like biological enhancement of our physical and intellectual capabilities, and perhaps other capabilities, emotional, moral. And so there's a whole host. There's just a couple of examples, maybe two of the more prominent ones, but only a couple of examples of the kind of things that we would be faced with, both from the very existence of an artificial intelligence and from the so-called benefits that artificial intelligence gave us, would all pose ethical challenges. Number three, Bostrom asked the question whether progress towards a superintelligence should be accelerated or delayed. What is your answer? Well, I mean, obviously, there's no right or wrong answer in my mind there. There are just different opinions. Clearly, we are going to probably be relying upon our predispositions in the matter. If we are really focused on technological progress and we think that that's a very, very important thing, then we're probably going to want the singularity to happen, and probably sooner rather than later. I should say that the brief excerpt I gave you from I.J. Good certainly, in a very thoughtful way, does say that. He was thinking of the Cold War, I think. He was thinking of the danger of nuclear war especially between the Americans and the Russians in the mid 60s. But I think there are all sort of reasons today to want to accelerate if it's possible, if it's something that will happen, to accelerate it, the development of the emergence of a superintelligence. And one could point to any number of global problems, but especially the problem of global warming. That is, without a doubt, the deepest problem that the human species faces right now is the disastrous changes happening to the climate. Presumably, a superintelligence could, if not solve those problems, then at least give us options that we don't currently have. Just as an example of why we might want the superintelligence to be accelerated in its emergence. And on the other hand, there are all sorts of reasons to delay it or maybe even try to prevent it. And that is that everybody who talks about the singularity is bound to mention that it could pose an existential threat to the human species. That is, the emergence of a superintelligence is by definition an emergence of a completely unpredictable future, because the whole idea of a superintelligence is that it would be so far beyond our intellectual capacities that we can't even imagine what it would be like, really. And there are different scenarios in which what it would be like would be a threat to the species, to even the continued existence of the human species. So there's a very, I think, plausible, rational, reasonable case to be made that if the singularity does entail the emergence of a super AI, that it's something that we should seek to prevent. I don't know. So that's what I had in mind. Again, it's pretty open-ended questions, but that's what I was thinking.